Yeah.
Well, after that in the 80s came the mega hit Dynasty. And the 80s was also when you decided to do something like build the largest single residence family house at that time that ever existed. Talk to me about that. Like, where was that? I mean, because you were very involved in all the decisions, the plans, everything. Like, where does that come from? You just, did you always know you had this design capability in you?
Well, I don't know if you know that I went to Chenard's Art College, and I graduated as an interior designer, and I worked for a
Wow.
commercial company doing condominiums and condos and lobbies, and I could never get a job doing someone's home. No one trusted me until actually we finished the Manor, and then I had all kinds of offers, and I'm like, I don't want to do that now. Now I don't want to do your house. No one wanted me before, but I was just, I don't know. It was like in my head. I always had, I read books, and it was like Aaron's office had to be like Louis B. Mayer's, but better. I mean, it had to be that they walked a mile, and I'm exaggerating, of course, to get to his desk, because they've lost by then. And whatever he wanted out of that person, he was going to get it and more. I dreamed movies. I dreamed television. I just, I don't know. I guess I had great fantasies. And speaking of fantasies, that was one of Aaron's shows that was probably my most favorite, was because people got their fantasies not always the way they wanted them, but it was one of my favorite shows that he did.
You love Fantasy Island.
I loved it. I loved it.
Do you have a favorite memory of living at the Manor for all those years?
Oh, it's so hard to say. I mean, we had so many fabulous moments with our kids and our family. I mean, Christmas time was amazing, and Thanksgiving was amazing, and always, always with both our kids, they all had friends that never had anywhere to go at Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter, whatever it was. And it was our house. They knew it was always fine.
Well, you certainly had the room for everybody.
Oh, yes.
I mean, the Manor has its own Wikipedia page. I mean, listen, it's 123 rooms. They say 56,000 square feet, 27 bathrooms, 14 bedrooms. Like, have you ever read something about the Manor where you're like, this is just preposterous, guys? It's not true.
It's probably a little bit exaggerated. Let me put it that way. I won't get into it, but I would say that it's probably quite exaggerated, but what can I do? You know what? We have nothing to do with Wikipedia pages. That's, I guess, whoever writes in and they write it. I have no idea who writes those.
Well, there's very few homes that have their own page. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you.
Did you have a favorite room at the Manor out of all those rooms?
I had, I had many, but of course my rap rooms were, that was like, that's where I went to relax, and that was always enjoyable to me. But I think the most special room was Aaron's office, our library that I built for his scripts. And he would be so excited. He would be in bed sometimes on the weekends, and he'd be writing, and he'd earmark the pages as he wrote on them. And he'd be so proud when almost every page was earmarked. And I would say, what is this? I said, you just rewrote the entire script. And I said, somebody else is going to get paid and they're going to get credit for it. And he said, that's all right, but I made it better. And I said, but
Wow.
that's not right. You rewrote the whole script. And he said, I don't care. He said, but it's going to be better.
Wow.
And that's all that, it was so important to him that his product be fabulous. He didn't care who got the credit.
Wow. I mean, you don't see that in Hollywood very
No, you
often.
don't. You don't. And so that room was probably the most special. And that's where we all gathered together. A fire would be going, and all the kids would come, everyone would come in there. And it was probably the best room in the house.
Well, there's so much. You basically put gift wrapping rooms on the map. Like people actually now have houses that have gift wrapping rooms, probably on a smaller scale because of you, Candy. So I,
I have one thing to say about that.
yes.
Before my gift wrapping room, and I know I've heard like houses being built and they have gift wrapping rooms, but before that, people had, and I know DIY came in after that, but before that, they had hobby rooms. They had, rooms where they did woodworking and they did, sewing. I mean, go back to 1868, and they had sewing rooms then. I mean, long
Yeah.
before we were born. So, I mean, it wasn't so unusual to have a hobby room of some sort. It's just that I called it a gift wrapping room because that's what I did.
That's just, well, it has taken off. Speaking of Dynasty, I mean, Aaron called Heather Locklear his lucky penny. Tell us, what was Heather Locklear like?
She, you know what? She was very shy and very quiet, um, and I know later on there was like a lot of wild child kind of press, and I never knew that side of Heather. I have to say, I remember when she married Tommy.
Tommy Lee.
Yes, and he said, "Aaron, I promise I will take great care of her." And I don't know what happened after that, but I mean, she was, she was on a lot of his shows. She was on TJ Hooker. He afforded her to then go on to Dynasty while she was shooting both shows at the same
Right.
time. So he would adjust her schedule so she could accommodate him to shoot both at the same time by, making her schedule. One would be in the morning, one would be in the afternoon. I mean, he could do that.
He was
So,
the boss.
yes.
Well, and after a slow start to the first season of Melrose Place, I mean, she came in and everything
Nailed
was,
it. I mean, all of a sudden it took off after that. So, I mean, it kind of like, it was a little bit of a slow start with Melrose Place, and then it hit. And he always felt that it was, it was because of Heather.
well, out of all of the Aaron Spelling shows, and they were all phenomenal. Let me just tell you while I have you here that Melrose Place is by far my absolute favorite. It was a brilliant, brilliant show. When I met Darren Star, he was like, "You don't want to talk about Sex in the City?" I'm like, "No, I don't want to talk about Sex in the City. I just want to talk to you about Melrose Place, period, the end." So that was brilliant. Were you shocked? Like you would think at that time, like the face of teen angst and young drama, you wouldn't think would have been Aaron Spelling up to that point. But then we have 90210 and Melrose Place and Charmed. I mean, were you guys like aware that, this whole new generation was now discovering like the brilliance of Aaron Spelling?
Really. I mean, there was a time just before that where the headlines of Variety said, "Spelling Dynasty dead." And you know what? It was really sad. And that was because of one man. Brandon Stoddard was at ABC, and he came in as head of everything. And he said, "I'm going to get rid of Aaron Spelling." And he said, "I'm going to get him every show out of here," which is exactly what he did. And guess what? It didn't work for very long.
Guess who had the last laugh there? I
Yeah.
mean, that was there, I mean, it was a brilliant career up to that point, but 90210 to like a certain generation. I mean, that's what they know, that Melrose
True.
Place and Charmed. They were brilliant.